This next one.
Good answer. Thank you. Thank you for 50 points now.
This next one was sent in on Twitter using a hashtag CornyDriveThru from Grant Cameron. Did Dusty want Rick Steiner to beat Ric Flair at Starrcade 88 in under 4 minutes? Did Flair go over Dusty's head and get it changed? Did this lead to Dusty no-showing a house show in D.C. soon after in protest? Did any of this happen?
Well, it's been reported, has it not, that Dusty was getting grumpy and Dusty and Flair were getting grumpy with each other, and Dusty wanted to make Flair and Rick Steiner the match at Starrcade 88 because he wanted to push Steiner and make him a top gimmick babyface.
Well, was it that, or was he wanted to show Ric Flair who the boss was?
Well, and he wanted to show Ric Flair who the boss was. But I'm trying to think who took it to that. Was that when Herd was first becoming involved, or was that before Herd?
I think it was before Herd, because Starrcade 88 would have been December.
That's right. What happened was that Jim Crockett was the interim booker when they fired Dusty right about this time and over some of this. Turner had just bought the company, and one of the primary reasons was because of all the wrestlers. Ted Turner knew Ric Flair, knew who he was, and knew him, had met him, and in some of the photo ops that Turner would occasionally, pop up for. And that's kind of why they bought the thing. Well, now Rick and Dusty are mad at each other, and Dusty wants to show him who's boss, and Dusty's also concerned because Turner's just bought the company. He wants to continue as booker. That's why he turned the Road Warriors and put himself in an angle with them. That's why he had heated up some other stuff. He'd got everything to where he thought that it would be to draw some money to show them that, he was doing his thing. But several things started backfiring. They didn't like the people did not want to boo the Road Warriors, whether they were heels or not. The spike in the eye got fucking heat on Dusty, which was like just a couple of weeks or maybe even a week after I'd bled buckets. And they said they didn't want any more juice. So what Dusty did was turn around and get juice himself by having the Road Warriors stick a spike in his fucking eye. So that wasn't good. And some way, and I'm trying to remember the chain of the information of whether it was through Jim Crockett or whatever the case, Turner Broadcasting made the choice there to fire Dusty as the booker, but keep him as a talent. And that's when they named Jim Crockett as the interim booker until they could find a new one, because by that point they knew that Jim Herd was coming in, and they figured, well, fuck, we'll search for another booker, which that ended up with George Scott. So we know how that turned out. So the point is, I don't remember Dusty no-showing a house show in Washington and protest over that. It may have been when they told him they removed him as booker, but did he even no-show one? I can't remember. Because that's the point in time where Turner Broadcasting was trying to save on plane tickets and not flying me and Heyman to the fucking house shows. Remember that?
That's right.
So I may not have been there to know whether he no-showed either, because they'd already mandatory no-showed me and Paulie. So I don't know. It was a mess.
Now, Steiner ends up winning the TV title from Mike Rotunda at Starrcade. And that was obviously the program that had been set up for a long time, with them being in the Varsity Club. How do you think it would have gone over if all of a sudden, instead of that, you don't go to the Steiner-Rotunda match, you go to Steiner versus Ric Flair, and he beats Flair in under 4 minutes?
Well, I've also heard that I don't think that would have been the case, regardless of whether they'd had the match or not. I think that's been romanticized, because I don't remember anybody else ever, Dusty having an idea for anybody else ever doing a 4-minute world title match, regardless of the finish. Has that not always sounded a little fucking dodgy to you?
Yes and no. Knowing the dynamics behind the scenes at that point, Flair was really unhappy with Dusty. Arn and Tully had been unhappy with Dusty and they left, so now Flair doesn't even have them there. I could see Ric Flair and Dusty, they always had a love-hate relationship. Again, I know in the later years before Dusty passed, they loved each other and they were great.
Yeah.
But look at 1991 where Flair left the company. Talked to people who were in Baltimore. They said Dusty was at the bar celebrating that he wouldn't have to deal with Flair anymore. So, I mean, I think I could see Dusty at that period of time, who was, again, he just did that Road Warrior angle, which didn't work and also got him in trouble. I could see him maybe thinking about showing Ric Flair who the boss was.
I can see the statement being made out loud that, well, baby, if he don't want to do the job for him, Steiner could beat him in about 4 minutes. I can see something like that, and then it being taken and run away with. But regardless, I think the people obviously would have cheered and loved it if Rick Steiner had beaten Ric Flair on pay-per-view for the world title. But
how would they have reacted in Baltimore? You think they would have reacted positively to that?
I think they honestly would. People remember Steiner, the dog-faced gremlin. He was one of the more popular fucking people,
absolutely,
babyface or heel, in the company, and Kevin Sullivan especially did a masterful job with that because that's what they were going for. He was an updated Plowboy Frazier. But this time he was a lovable guy who happened to be a legitimate shooter who was being treated as a flunky because he was mentally deficient in some respect, but the people liked him, and the more that Sullivan mistreated him, the more they wanted to see that. And finally, a lot of people forget when the Steiner brothers first got together, Rick Steiner was the star and Scott was the little brother.
We just talked about that on the Observer Hall of Fame special that comes out this week because I voted for the Steiner brothers for the Hall of Fame. Again, I look at...
Wait a minute, the Steiner brothers are not even in the Wrestling Hall of Fame, but Twinkle Toes McFingerbang is a first ballot Hall of Famer.
The Steiner brothers aren't, but I think going back now, they look even more impressive when you go watch them. And that was one of the points I brought up was Scott came in, he was just Rick's little brother.
Yeah.
And then really quickly it was like, oh my God, this guy's doing revolutionary stuff we've never seen before. And they became, in the ring, one of the most dynamic tag teams of all time for 5 years.
Yeah, so, I mean, the people would have liked it, whether it's Baltimore or not, because Steiner was over. Whether it would have been the right thing for business is another decision, because Steiner had not been portrayed in that spot, but yet, by the same token, they with the exception of the in-ring quality of 1989, when Flair ended up with the book, having the trilogy with Steamboat, doing the thing with Funk, etc., business was never as good as it was for WCW when they bought it, as it was when they bought it for Crockett for another 6 fucking years. So it couldn't have been too much worse than what they ended up doing, except it wouldn't have given us that big year of 89 with all those great matches and Flair somewhat bringing it back around. But Rick Steiner as world champion in 1992 would probably look better than what they were doing in front of no people in empty buildings.